My name is Eileen Parker, and I was standing in the middle of the Westbrook Hotel Grand Ballroom when my stepmother's voice shattered the music, the laughter, and every ounce of peace in the room. "Return what isn't yours, Eileen." Her scream echoed under the crystal chandeliers, sharp and poisonous. "You stole my daughter's birthright." The light from the chandeliers felt suddenly dim, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Every conversation died. Every glass froze midair. Dozens of faces turned toward me, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock, then slowly to judgment. My fingers tightened around my champagne glass. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I felt frozen, rooted to the marble floor, like a criminal caught in the act. Just 1 hour earlier, I had walked into this same ballroom for my stepmother Miranda's 55th birthday gala, genuinely hoping it could be a fresh start. It had been a year since my father's death, and the tension between us had grown unbearable. When her invitation arrived, elegant and polite, I believed, foolishly, that it was an olive branch. I couldn't have been more wrong. This wasn't reconciliation. It was an ambush. "That company belongs to Serena," Miranda continued, striding toward me as whispers rippled through Houston's elite. "Your father built it for his children, and you manipulated him when he was sick." I searched the room desperately for a friendly face. Clients. Suppliers. Board members. People I had worked with for months as CEO of Parker Manufacturing. Men and women who had shaken my hand, praised my decisions, trusted my leadership. Now they looked at me like I was a fraud. "That's not what happened," I said, but my voice sounded small even to my own ears. Dad's will was clear. He wanted his real daughter to have the company, Miranda cut in coldly. Not some piano-playing charity case who barely visited him. The words sliced through me. Yes, I was a concert pianist. Yes, I had toured for years. And yes, I carried guilt every day for the time I hadn't spent at home. But to have it thrown at me like a weapon, in front of the entire business community, was devastating. Behind her stood my stepsister Serena, her lips curved in a faint, satisfied smile. She had never shown interest in the factory, the workers, or the endless financial meetings while Dad was alive. Yet now she nodded along as if every lie was truth. "She's right," someone murmured nearby. "I always wondered how Eileen suddenly appeared when Mr. Parker got sick," another voice added. A soft boo followed. The room closed in on me. "I think you should leave," Miranda said calmly now, the tone of someone who knew she had already won. "No one wants a thief at this celebration." My legs trembled as I turned toward the exit. With every step, humiliation burned deeper. These weren't strangers. This was the city's business elite. The people whose respect I had spent a year earning after my father entrusted me with his life's work. In the parking lot, inside the dark silence of my car, the tears finally came. My father, Richard Parker, had built Parker Manufacturing from nothing over 4 decades. He married Miranda when I was 15, bringing her and her 12-year-old daughter Serena into our lives after my mother's death. When cancer took him 3 years ago, everything changed. And tonight, at what was supposed to be a birthday celebration, they had declared war. The engine was still running, but I sat there in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The muffled sounds of laughter and music from the ballroom drifted through the closed windows, mocking me. Inside, Miranda was probably accepting birthday wishes, smiling like she hadn't just destroyed my reputation in front of the most powerful people in the city. My phone buzzed in my hand. "Done, you're right." My father's longtime attorney. The executor of his will. The man who had stood beside him through every legal battle, every contract, every strategic move. Just heard what happened. Are you okay? Call me. I swallowed hard and dialed. Eileen, Daniel said the moment he picked up, his deep, steady voice grounding me. Where are you right now? In the parking lot, I whispered. They turned everyone against me. They think I stole the company. They think I manipulated Dad when he was dying. There was a brief, dangerous silence on the other end. That is unacceptable, he finally said. Miranda knows exactly what she's doing. She's lost in court 3 times. She can't win legally, so now she's trying to win socially. But it's working, I said, staring at the hotel's glowing entrance. Those people are my clients. My partners. The board trusts their opinions. If they believe her, they won't, Daniel cut in firmly. Not when they see the truth. I close my eyes. The truth doesn't matter when lies are shouted louder. Another pause. Then his voice lowered. Do you have your laptop with you? It's in the trunk. Why? Because if Miranda wants this to be public, he said, then we're going to make it fully public. Every court ruling. Every medical evaluation. Every recording your father left. Meet me at my office in 30 minutes. Something in his tone lit a spark inside me, something that wasn't fear anymore. Okay, I said quietly. I'll be there. Daniel's office downtown was still brightly lit when I arrived. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city's skyline, cold and sharp against the night. Inside, the conference table was already covered with neatly stacked binders, legal files, and labeled folders. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mix of anger and resolve. Richard anticipated this, he said. He knew Miranda might try to rewrite history. He handed me a small USB drive. This, he continued, contains a video statement your father recorded 3 months before he passed. He explained his decision in detail, in the presence of a doctor and 2 witnesses. My chest tightened. I had known about the recording, but I had never had the courage to watch it. There's more, Daniel added, opening another file. Financial records showing how you grew the company by 22% in 1 year. Board minutes. Emails. Employee statements. Even proof that Serena was offered a leadership role and refused it. A plan began forming in my mind, sharp and clear. You still have that industrial printer? I asked. Daniel's eyebrows rose. Then he smiled. Fastest one in the city. Within the hour, the quiet law office turned into a war room. Paper slid out of printers in steady streams. Binders were labeled. Tabs were inserted. Evidence was organized, not emotionally, not defensively, but methodically. This isn't about embarrassing them, Daniel said as he walked. It's about ending this permanently. I nodded. My father always said, when someone attacks your integrity, you don't argue. You prove. At 10:40 p.m., we loaded everything into Daniel's SUV. As we drove back toward the Westbrook Hotel, my nerves returned, but this time, they were mixed with something new. Not shame. Not fear. Purpose. They humiliated you in that room, Daniel said, eyes on the road. Now you're going back as what you truly are. I took a slow breath. The CEO, I said. The hotel lights came into view. The same doors I had fled through in tears less than 2 hours earlier now stood before me again. This time, I wasn't running. This time, I was walking back in with the truth. The ballroom doors opened again, and a wave of warm light and classical music washed over us. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. One by one, heads turned. I could feel their eyes on me, the same eyes that had judged, whispered, and believed the worst just an hour earlier. This time, I didn't lower my gaze. Daniel walked at my side, calm and authoritative, flanked by 2 senior attorneys from his firm. In his hands were the first of many thick binders. The sight alone shifted the energy in the room. Power recognizes power, and 4 lawyers moving with purpose looked nothing like a defeated woman fleeing in tears. Miranda stood near the cake display, laughing loudly with a group of socialites. When she saw me, the color drained from her face. Her smile froze, then collapsed. Serena, beside her, whispered something urgently, gripping her mother's arm. Daniel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the soft music. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" The string quartet faltered and then fell silent. The entire ballroom turned toward us. "My name is Daniel Wright," he continued, longtime counsel to Richard Carter and executor of his estate. "Earlier this evening, serious allegations were made against my client, Eileen Carter, regarding the ownership and leadership of Carter Industries. Those statements were false, defamatory, and directly contradict legally established facts." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "We are here to clarify the record." At his signal, the other attorneys began distributing binders to every table. Guests accepted them hesitantly, curiosity overtaking discomfort as they flipped them open. I stepped forward, my heart steady now, my voice clear. 2 hours ago, I was accused of stealing my father's company. I was called a manipulator, a fraud, and a disgrace to his legacy. Many of you believed it. I paused, letting the weight of that truth settle. "What you weren't told," I continued, "is that my stepmother has challenged my father's will in court 3 times, and lost every time. What you weren't told is that his mental competence was certified by independent physicians. What you weren't told is that my father left behind not just a will, but proof." Daniel nodded to one of his colleagues, who connected the USB drive to the ballroom's projection system. The screen flickered. Then my father appeared. Weakened by illness, yes, but his eyes were sharp, focused, unmistakably himself. "My name is Richard Carter," the recording began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I am recording this statement in the presence of my attorney, Daniel Wright, and Dr. Eleanor Shaw, who has certified my mental competency. I am of sound mind and making this decision freely." The room fell into absolute silence. "I have chosen my daughter, Eileen Carter, to inherit controlling interests in Carter Industries. This decision is not based on sentiment, but on capability." Images followed, me in factory meetings, reviewing contracts, discussing expansion plans with him late at night, sitting beside his hospital bed with spreadsheets and market analyses. "Serena has been offered leadership roles," my father continued gently. "She declined them. She has no interest in this business. Eileen does. She understands it. She loves it. And she will protect it." A sharp intake of breath swept through the crowd as the video showed Serena, younger, laughing and saying, "I don't want my life stuck in a factory." The screen faded to black. For a moment, no one spoke. Then whispers erupted, this time not of accusation, but of shock. I looked directly at Miranda. "You told them I manipulated him while he was dying," I said quietly. "But he was planning, documenting, and protecting this company, and me, until the very end." Daniel gestured to the binders. "Inside you'll find the court rulings, medical certifications, financial growth reports, and employee testimonials. Everything that proves Eileen Carter is not only the rightful heir, but the most qualified leader Carter Industries has. A tall man near the front, Gregory Hale, one of our largest clients, stood slowly. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "I should have asked for facts before believing rumors." One by one, others nodded. Some avoided my eyes in shame. Others looked at me with something new, respect. Behind them, Miranda's face had gone rigid, her carefully crafted confidence cracking. This was no longer her stage. It was mine. The tension in the room shifted, thick and electric, as the last frame of my father's video faded from the screen. The silence that followed was heavier than the earlier accusations. This wasn't the awkward quiet of gossip anymore, it was the stunned stillness of people realizing they had been wrong. Miranda was the first to move. "You planned this," she hissed, pushing past one of the attorneys and stepping toward me. Her eyes burned with fury. "You turned my birthday into a courtroom." I met her gaze without flinching. "You turned it into a public execution." "I just brought the evidence to stop it." Serena stood frozen beside her, her earlier confidence gone. The smugness had drained from her face, replaced by panic as guests around her whispered while flipping through the binders. Daniel stepped forward smoothly, blocking Miranda's path. "Mrs. Carter, any further accusations made without evidence will be considered defamation. I suggest you choose your next words carefully." She opened her mouth to argue, but a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Richard would be ashamed of this." Edward Lawson, my father's former CFO, had risen from his table. He had worked with my dad for over 20 years and carried the quiet authority of someone who had helped build the company from the ground up. "I sat in those strategy meetings," he continued. "I saw Eileen step in when Richard was too weak to hold a pen. She kept contracts alive, reassured investors, and made payroll when things were at their worst. If anyone here deserves that company, it's her." A murmur of agreement followed. Another guest stood, then another. CEOs, suppliers, board advisors, people whose opinions shape reputations in this city. The same crowd that had judged me an hour earlier was now slowly, unmistakably, turning. Miranda's voice cracked. "You're all being manipulated. She's always been good at playing the victim." Daniel tapped one of the binders. Page 23. Hospital visitation logs. Eileen visited Richard 81 times in his final 6 months. Serena visited 11. "You visited 34. Serena flinched. "I had school," she muttered weakly. "And Eileen had a concert tour across 3 countries, Daniel replied calmly. "Yet she still came home every chance she could." The truth settled in like a weight. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "This isn't about humiliating anyone. It's about stopping a lie from becoming history. My father trusted me with his life's work. I won't let anyone rewrite that." Miranda's composure finally broke. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, her anger slipped into desperation. "The company was supposed to secure our future," she said quietly. "Richard promised we'd always be taken care of." "And you are," I replied. "The trust he set up ensured that. What he didn't do was give control to people who didn't want the responsibility, only the status." Serena stared at the floor, her hands clenched. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Gregory Hale raised his glass. "To the rightful CEO," he said simply. Applause began, slow at first, hesitant, then grew, spreading across the ballroom until it filled the space where hostility had once lived. Miranda grabbed Serena's arm, pulling her toward the exit. "This isn't over," she snapped, her voice sharp but unsteady. Daniel's voice followed them. "Any further legal challenges will be considered harassment. We will seek damages." The doors closed behind them, and the room seemed to exhale. People approached me, some apologizing, some congratulating, some quietly admitting they had always doubted Miranda's story but hadn't dared to speak. The humiliation of earlier began to dissolve, replaced by something far more powerful. Validation. As the evening resumed, the music returned, softer now, and the atmosphere transformed. No longer a battlefield, the ballroom became something else entirely, a place where the truth had finally been spoken. Daniel leaned in and said quietly, "This changes everything. Your position is no longer just legal. It's undeniable." I looked around at the faces that would shape the future of the company, the industry, the legacy my father had built. For the first time that night, I allowed myself to breathe. The war for my name was over. And I had won. The applause slowly faded, but the energy in the ballroom had completely transformed. Where there had once been cold stares and judgment, there were now nods of respect and quiet conversations filled with curiosity instead of accusation. People who had avoided my eyes earlier now approached me, one by one. "I should have asked you directly," said a senior supplier, shaking my hand. "Your father always spoke so highly of you." "I'm sorry I doubted that." Another guest, a board advisor, added, "What you did tonight took courage. Most people would have walked away and never returned." I smiled politely, but inside I felt something deeper than relief. I felt reclaimed, my name, my father's trust, my place in the world he had built. Daniel stood nearby, speaking with his colleagues, ensuring the binders were being collected discreetly. This wasn't about leaving evidence scattered like gossip, it was about making a statement and then moving forward with dignity. Edward Lawson joined me again, his expression thoughtful. "Your father used to say you had the rare combination of heart and steel," he said. Tonight, I finally saw what he meant. I swallowed past the emotion in my throat. He taught me that leadership isn't about being liked. It's about being responsible. Across the room, Serena sat alone at a small table, her earlier confidence completely gone. She looked younger somehow, stripped of her mother's armor. For a brief moment, I saw not a rival, but a lost younger sister who had never truly known what she wanted. Miranda, on the other hand, was gone. The space she had occupied near the cake display felt strangely empty, like the absence of a storm that had finally passed. As the party slowly returned to its rhythm, Gregory Hale approached me again. "My company would like to expand our partnership," he said. We were waiting to see how things stabilized after Richard's passing. Tonight answered all our questions. More offers followed, meetings, proposals, collaborations. The very people who had hesitated to commit to my leadership were now eager to align themselves with it. An hour later, as the gala wound down, Daniel leaned close. "This was more than reputation repair," he said. "This was a public confirmation of authority. From now on, any attempt to challenge your leadership will look like sour grapes, not concern." I nodded, understanding the deeper victory. Judith, Miranda, had wanted to isolate me. Instead, she had forced the truth into the open, where it could no longer be twisted. When I finally left the hotel, the night air felt cooler, cleaner. The city lights no longer blurred through unshed tears. I stood for a moment on the steps, looking back at the building where my humiliation had turned into vindication. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is Serena. Can we talk tomorrow? Without lawyers. Just as family." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to close that chapter forever. But another part remembered my father's voice, his belief that strength also meant giving people the chance to grow. Tomorrow. My office. 10 a.m., I typed back. As I drove home, the events of the night replayed in my mind, the accusation, the fear, the evidence, my father's face on the screen, the shift in the crowd. I realized something profound had happened. I hadn't just defended my inheritance. I had stepped fully into it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of Carter Industries' top-floor office. My name now gleamed on the glass door, Eileen Carter, Chief Executive Officer. For the first time, it didn't feel like a title I had been given. It felt like one I had earned. And somewhere, deep in my heart, I knew my father would have been proud. The next morning arrived faster than I expected. By the time the clock on my office wall read 9:45 a.m., I was already seated at the conference table, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold beside me. The city stretched out below the floor-to-ceiling windows, busy and indifferent, as if nothing extraordinary had happened the night before. At exactly 10, the door opened. Serena stepped in. She looked nothing like the confident woman from the gala. Her shoulders were tense, her makeup minimal, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, the weight of years of misunderstanding hanging between us. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. I gestured toward the chair across from me. "You said you wanted to talk." "I'm listening," she said, clasping her hands together as if afraid they might shake. "I didn't know about the documents. About the video. My mom told me you were trying to steal what belonged to us. That you were always jealous." I believed her because it was easier than questioning her. I studied her face, searching for deception. Instead, I saw something raw and honest. "When Dad got sick," she continued, "she kept saying you were too busy with your life to care. That you were only around when something was in it for you. I never checked. I never asked. I just accepted it." I took a slow breath. And now I realize how wrong I was. Her voice trembled. "The visitation logs, the emails, the way everyone spoke about you last night. I saw a version of you I was never allowed to see." Silence settled between us, not hostile this time, but heavy with everything that had gone unsaid for years. "I don't expect forgiveness," Serena added quickly. "I just didn't want the lie to be the last thing between us." I leaned back, considering her words. Truth has a way of doing that. It breaks things open. Sometimes painfully. She nodded. "My mother built her entire world on controlling the story. About you. About Dad. About me. Last night, that story collapsed. For the first time, I understood something important. Serena had been shaped by the same storm, just standing in a different place when it hit. "Miranda, your mother, will probably fight this," I said. "Legally, socially, emotionally. Are you prepared for that?" Serena hesitated, then straightened. "I can't keep pretending anymore. Even if it costs me her approval." That admission carried more courage than any accusation. Our meeting ended without dramatic embraces or grand promises. Just a quiet agreement to rebuild something that had never truly been allowed to exist. After she left, Daniel entered with a stack of reports. "We've received 3 formal letters of support from board members who were previously undecided. And 2 investment groups want to accelerate their negotiations." The ripple effect of last night was already in motion. But not all reactions were positive. By afternoon, News reached us that Miranda had contacted several media outlets, framing herself as a mother betrayed by a manipulative stepdaughter. The narrative was shifting again, though this time, it faced a wall of documented truth. "She's trying to control the damage," Daniel said. "But the public now has both sides. And one side has proof." I stood by the window, watching traffic flow like veins through the city. "She doesn't need to be defeated. She just needs to be stopped from rewriting reality." Daniel gave a small nod. "That's already happening." As evening approached, I found myself alone in my father's old office. The scent of leather and wood polish still lingered, unchanged. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk and found a worn notebook, its pages filled with handwritten notes. On the first page, in his familiar script, were the words, "Leadership is not about who claims the throne. It's about who carries the weight of it when everything is falling apart." I closed the notebook gently. The battle had never been about ownership. It had been about truth, responsibility, and the courage to stand when standing meant standing alone. And now, the storm was no longer behind me. It was finally, unmistakably, in my control. The storm did not end quietly. Within days, headlines began to surface, carefully worded at first, then bolder. Some portrayed Miranda as a grieving widow fighting for what she believed was rightfully hers. Others focused on the evidence, the board's public support, and the undeniable truth of my father's intentions. The world, it seemed, was watching a family conflict unfold like a corporate drama. But this time, I was no longer on the defensive. The board convened an emergency meeting, not because my position was in question, but because the company needed stability in the face of public scrutiny. I walked into the conference room with a calm I hadn't felt in months. Faces turned toward me, not with doubt, but with expectation. Edward Lawson spoke first. "Richard built this company on transparency. We will honor that. The documents have been verified. The succession is clear. Eileen is our CEO." The vote that followed was unanimous. When the gavel came down, it felt less like a legal formality and more like the closing of a chapter that had been left painfully unfinished. Outside the boardroom, Daniel updated me on Miranda's latest move. "She's filed a civil complaint, claiming emotional distress and coercion." I nodded. "Let her. Truth doesn't fear daylight." Serena called that evening. Her voice was steadier than it had been in my office days earlier. "She's furious," she admitted. "But she's also scared. Everything she built her identity on is crumbling." "Is she trying to turn you against me again?" I asked gently. A pause. "Then, yes. But it's not working." That answer carried more weight than she probably realized. Weeks passed. The media cycle moved on, as it always does, hungry for the next story. The lawsuit quietly lost momentum as evidence continued to surface: emails, witnesses, financial records. One by one, the pillars supporting Miranda's narrative fell away. And then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. Not from her lawyer. From Miranda herself. The handwriting was sharp, controlled, but the words revealed exhaustion. I wanted to protect what I thought was my family's future. In doing so, I tried to take what was never mine to control. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only ask that you allow the company, and Serena, to move forward without further conflict." I read it twice. There was no apology for the pain, no admission of manipulation, but there was something close to surrender. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet acknowledgement that the game was over. I placed the letter in my father's desk drawer, beside his notebook. Some battles don't end with triumph. They end with understanding. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I stood in the same office where I had once felt like an intruder in my own legacy. Now, the space felt different. Not because the furniture had changed, but because I had. I had learned that loyalty isn't proven by blood alone. That truth, even when delayed, has a gravity that eventually pulls everything into alignment. And that standing up for yourself doesn't make you heartless, it makes you whole. Serena joined me by the window. "I think he'd be proud of you," she said softly. I smiled. "I hope so." We didn't need to say more. The company was stable. The lies had been exposed. The future, once clouded by doubt and accusation, now stretched forward with clarity. I wasn't just a daughter who had defended her father's name. I was the leader who had earned her place. And for the first time since his passing, the weight on my chest lifted, replaced by a quiet certainty: the truth had won. So had I.